Prior to this hearing, Mr. Blanche told me he, quote, made a mistake, close quote, by creating the January 6th slush fund. Where did he say it? In my office, with witnesses, my staff, to what I'm about to say. When I asked him about this under oath, Mr. Blanche falsely claimed that he never made this statement. That's not true.
Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois did not open with outrage. He opened with a record, a private meeting, witnesses in the room, a January 6th fund, and one claim that goes straight to the center of Todd Blanche's nomination. Blanche was not just another official. He was Donald Trump's former personal lawyer. Then, he became one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in America. Now, Durbin was asking whether that same man could be trusted to lead the Department of Justice. The issue was not one answer. It was the pattern, the settlement, the tax language, the Epstein files, the redactions, and the refusal to say who gave the order. Durbin was not shouting. He was building a case. And behind every document was one question. Was the DOJ still serving the American people or one man?
And what have we learned in the last few weeks when it comes to Todd Blanche? We have learned that simply his word is not enough for most of us, not even for some of my Republican friends. Even his word under oath is not credible enough. We have a demand by colleagues that I support, a demand that Mr. Blanche, when it comes to important promises to the American people, put it in writing. Put it in writing. And in fact, he did. Mr. Chairman, the political escapade of the last week has made it clearer than ever that Todd Blanche has no business serving as our nation's chief law enforcement officer. 2 Republican members of this committee said they would not vote for Mr. Blanche unless the J6 cop beater slush fund was permanently and irrevocably terminated. And of course, these 2 members, and I support their position, said to Mr. Blanche, you have to put it in writing if you're going to say those words. President Trump responded, as we might have guessed, as he always does, by doubling down on his position and personally attacking our colleagues. To state the obvious, Mr. Blanche's statement on the slush fund and the IRS immunity agreement are not signed by the parties to the settlement agreement and are therefore unenforceable. The parties could still sue to enforce the agreement, and the Cop Beaters Fund can easily be revived with a new order from the Department of Justice 15 minutes after Mr. Blanche is confirmed as Attorney General. Indeed, the President himself has loudly telegraphed that's his plan. This is the exact issue that the 2 senators identified as a basis for their objection to his nomination, Blanche's nomination. To my Republican colleagues, you gave Mr. Blanche the benefit of the doubt when you supported his nomination to be Deputy Attorney General. 17 months later, there is no doubt where his loyalty will lie. Take a look at this promise, unprecedented, I believe, in the history of the United States, that somehow Mr. Blanche engineered an agreement, an understanding, a settlement, you name it, that said that Donald Trump will never be held responsible for any violations of tax crimes before the date of this document that was signed. Saying that the president can commit any crime in the tax code and not be held personally responsible? Does that sound like he is being held to an accountability that we all expect of every single American? Instead of serving the American people and upholding the rule of law and the Constitution, Mr. Blanche has aided and abetted the most corrupt administration in the history of the United States. Prior to this hearing, Mr. Blanche told me he, quote, made a mistake, close quote, by creating the January 6th slush fund. Where did he say it? In my office, with witnesses, my staff, to what I'm about to say. When I asked him about this under oath, Mr. Blanche falsely claimed that he never made this statement. That's not true. Mr. Blanche's willingness to casually lie under oath about a statement he made in a room full of witnesses shows the lengths he will go to avoid offending President Trump. Why doesn't he want to concede he made a mistake? We all do that from time to time, right? No, no, no. Manly MAGA leaders do not admit a mistake or use the word sorry. So he was held accountable by the president. Mr. Blanche has claimed he recused himself from matters involving President Trump in his personal capacity. Yet he personally signed the agreement releasing President Trump, his family, and businesses from tax liability. When asked how DOJ justified the slush fund's outrageous $1.776 billion price tag, Mr. Blanche refused to answer. He shows contempt for this committee and for our history by refusing to admit that the sum was chosen to signal support for the January 6 rioters, and many of us remember when they attacked and invaded the Capitol. Those rioters shamelessly invoked 1776 to compare themselves to American revolutionaries. Give me a break. Mr. Blanche told me that a ruling against the settlement was, quote, a hit piece personally directed at him. This is no surprise coming from the man who declared that the Justice Department is, quote, at war, close quote, with the courts. These are not the words of someone who would serve our nation as a top law enforcement official. One of Mr. Blanche's first acts as Deputy Attorney General was to issue a memo gutting DOJ's crypto crime enforcement, which allowed the president to rake in $1.4 billion in a crypto windfall last year, even as Americans reported billions of dollars in cryptocurrency fraud losses. The president did just fine, thank you. Meanwhile, Mr. Blanche still has, through his children and grandchildren, $150,000 in crypto assets. Last year, under Mr. Blanche's leadership, more than 1,000 FBI personnel were pulled off key law enforcement priorities. What was a higher priority than their oath they've taken to uphold the law? They were directed to flag Epstein records and look for any mention of Donald Trump. Mr. Blanche refused to tell me who gave this order, but former Attorney General Bondi made it clear, saying Blanche was, quote, in charge of the Epstein files. And when the Epstein Files Transparency Act forced DOJ to release the files, not only did the department delay reviewing and producing it, it recklessly failed to redact hundreds of survivors' personal information, victimizing them all over again. And they testified before this committee under oath to that fact. Meanwhile, the names of powerful Epstein cronies remain protected, in clear violation of the law. When scrutiny of the Epstein cover-up intensified, Mr. Blanche participated in secret meetings in the White House Situation Room, of all places, to strategize about protecting Trump, not Epstein survivors. Mr. Blanche volunteered to interview convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell, a transparent attempt to exonerate President Trump. Just days later, she was transferred to a minimum security camp, which is unheard of, unprecedented for serious sex offenders like her. Mr. Blanche agreed to meet with Epstein survivors after months of pleas, only when his nomination was in jeopardy, and a member of this committee said he wouldn't consider voting for him unless he met with these survivors. He finally met with them for almost an hour. As one survivor, Dan Obinsky, who testified before this committee, said, the meeting was a box-checking exercise. Mr. Blanche refused to take accountability for redaction failures, and he wouldn't commit to following their suggested investigative leads. It is clear that Mr. Blanche hopes to sweep the Epstein scandal under the rug. I thank those survivors for the courage they showed in this room today and around the country for continuing to advocate for survivors and speak truth to power.
The contradiction at the center of this clip is not complicated. Todd Blanche, according to Senator Durbin, wanted the authority of the nation's top law enforcement office, but Durbin says the record showed something else. Promises that had to be put in writing, sworn testimony that Durbin says did not match a private conversation, and a Department of Justice being treated less like an independent institution and more like a legal shield for one man. Durbin did not build that argument with one line. He built it piece by piece. First, the written promise. Durbin says even some Republicans would not rely on Blanche's word alone. They wanted it in writing. That matters because when public officials make promises about enforcement, settlements, or recusals, the form matters. A press statement is not the same thing as a binding court order. A letter is not always the same thing as an enforceable settlement. And according to Durbin, the statement on the January 6th fund and the IRS immunity agreement was not signed by the parties to the settlement. In his argument, that made it vulnerable, temporary, reversible. Then came the sworn testimony. Durbin says Blanche told him privately, with witnesses present, that creating the January 6th fund was a mistake. But when asked under oath, according to Durbin, Blanche denied making that statement. That is why this moment is so serious. The issue is not only whether Blanche supported a policy, the issue is whether the committee can trust the witness when the record is being made. Then Durbin moved to the files, Epstein records, redactions, survivors' personal information, names names of powerful people still protected, according to his account. More than 1,000 FBI personnel pulled from other priorities to flag Epstein records and search for mentions of Donald Trump. Secret meetings in the White House Situation Room, Ghislaine Maxwell, a transfer to a minimum security camp. Each detail adds to the same pattern Durbin is trying to establish. When the record threatened Trump, the system moved around Trump. That is why Blanche's answer, or lack of answer, does not resolve the problem. Refusing to say who gave an order does not erase the order. Saying a fund is dead does not explain why it existed. Claiming recusal does not answer why he signed an agreement involving Trump, his family, and his businesses. And denying a private statement under oath does not make Durbin's witnesses disappear. For viewers, this is not abstract procedure. The Department of Justice decides whether fraud is pursued, whether political violence is treated seriously, whether victims' files are protected, and whether powerful people face the same law as everyone else. If the DOJ becomes a private firm for the president, ordinary people do not just lose faith in Washington, they lose the guarantee that the rules apply upward. This clip is not just about Todd Blanche. It is about the permanent record. A justice system can survive hard questions. It cannot survive becoming one man's defense strategy.